Welcome back to With the First Pick. The 2026 NFL Draft might be put to bed, but we're right back in the old lab here on the podcast because today I'm rolling out my way too early 2027 mock draft. Let's see here. Checks notes ran 358 days before the 2027 NFL Draft in Washington, D.C. I'm Ryan Wilson. That's former Titans GM Ran Carthon. And Rand, did you enjoy your 15 minutes of vacation?
Nope. That's all I got for you. Nope.
You did say, peek behind the curtain, that you were, is it weird that I'm looking ahead to the 2027 class? And the answer is no. And you're actually ahead of me. I've had to wrap some things up on 2026 in terms of some stuff on the website, cbssports.com, put out my draft grades, and you're cheating. So you got a head start on me, at least with these quarterbacks. So you didn't want that vacation is what it sounds like.
Well, it's coming, but I'm already 10 quarterbacks in. Got my 11th queued up right now. I just had to make my note because I got my film going right here next to me where my stopping point is so I could focus in on the gibberish that you're going to be talking about here for the next hour.
You see that, producer Sharon, humble brag and gets a shot at the co-host here. That's how we do it. All right.
First of all, let me hold up. Nope. Let me tell you what he did, Sharon, and then we could start. We were all sitting at the desk, myself, Ryan, B-Mac, and Pete. And then our humble, gracious host kindly let everyone know that this is my show. This is my show. So he did his peacock thing and flexed his feathers and let everyone know, like, hey, there was a show before all of you got here, and there will be a show after all of you leave because this is my show.
I didn't say any of that stuff. And in my defense, this was well into day 3, and the abuse I've been taking from the three stooges that I like to call them by the time we got out of there. But it was all fun. We had a blast, actually. If you missed any of the draft coverage, you can check it out on YouTube, CBS Sports, and go through all those things. We went through every single grade, all the recaps from days 1, 2, and 3, and it's all love. Rand's just kidding here. We had a great time. It is my show, but we did have a really good time. All right, producer Sharon, let's look ahead at the way too early 2027 picks 1 through 8. We'll start there. We'll look at the graphic, and Rand, we can hop around, but I think the conversation is going to start with the quarterbacks there at the top, and perhaps stuff that'll get folks most angry is that Arch Quavy, it says you've taken the call on him last fall before he decided to come back to school, is number 2. He's not number 1. I have Dante Moore number 1, and if we're being honest, I almost put Jaden Maiava number 2. He had a better season than Arch Manning. Either way, Dante Moore to the Dolphins. I wouldn't get so caught up on the teams. This is more of a watch list, and we don't know what the draft order is going to be. This is reverse Super Bowl odds by way of FanDuel, so we yell at them if you're angry about that. Number 2, Arch Manning to the Jets. Little payback for Rick Spielman there. And then number 3, Jaden Maiava to the Cardinals. And if you scroll down there at number 8, Darian Mensah, who transferred from Duke to the U, the latest U quarterback to transfer in. I have him going to the Pittsburgh Steelers. So let's start with the quarterbacks, Rand. Give me your thoughts on these players. And if you want to push back at all on the idea of Dante Moore going ahead of Arch Manning here in late April.
No, I pulled up my board here, and I have Dante Moore as the number 1 quarterback coming into the fall, or we'll just say coming into the summer. I have him as my number 1 quarterback. I do have Arch. I have a bucket of Arch, Julian Sang, and Brandon Sorsby. You know, this was pre-controversy with Brandon Sorsby. I have them all kind of right there together. And then, you know, after that, I have Darian Mensah, CJ Carr, Trinidad Chambliss, and Jaden Maiava. I had a little bit more love for Jaden Maiava at the beginning of last fall when we first started watching him and you first brought him up. Then the other night watched some later tape, which kind of didn't, you know, it didn't look like the other stuff, I'll say.
Yeah.
And so I brought him down a little bit. And obviously, and I've said this on radio this morning, you know, I do reserve the right to change my mind. So this is just, you know, how it is for right now. And, you know, some of these guys we already watched, right? We already had watched Dante Moore and Arch, Mensah's, and then Trinidad Chambliss and Jaden Maiava. And then I've also done Lenore Sellers and Drew Mestermaker. But it'll be interesting to see where things go with Brandon Sorsby and how that goes. It was brought up on a radio show I did this morning that what about him in the supplemental draft? And again, now that would be really interesting. I don't know the last time. I think Walsh from the University of Miami. I think Dallas Cowboys took him pretty high, and there may have been another guy a quarterback that have gone in the supplemental draft. So be interesting. That'll be an interesting development to follow because that really could shake up not only the rankings but how teams approach the quarterback position going into this time next year.
Yeah, Sorsby had a lot of love even after the season in Cincinnati and whether he would come out. I thought he was day 2 pick before he decided to transfer. Our Jonathan Jones, our NFL insider, wrote about the possibility of him in the supplemental draft, and it's not as clear cut as him just declaring. The NFL has to approve it. So check that out on the website. And just to follow back here, the last quarterback selected in the supplemental draft, Terrell Pryor, 2011, Ohio State, who played quarterback, then moved to wide receiver because of the insane athleticism. Yeah, and the other thing is, and we'll talk about this at the end of the show. I should tease this now. We're going to look back at my 2026 way too early mock draft from 11 and a half months ago or whenever it was, and you'll see some names that are familiar and some names that are like, yeah, we were talking that guy up and it didn't quite work out. So to Rand's point, we do reserve the right to change our opinions here. Looking back at that graphic, producer Sharon, I would argue, and my buddy Coop Patagna, who works for CBS Sports and crushes it in the transfer portal and put out his way too early mock draft last week, Jeremiah Smith is his number 1 player. So we can talk a little bit about Jeremiah Smith here. We can talk about the edge rushers, Colin Simmons and Dylan Stewart, because those dudes get after it in a way that would have been fun had they been in this draft class. But tell me about the notion of Jeremiah Smith, and I'll ask you a little trivia question here. When was the last time a wide receiver went first overall in the NFL draft?
Was it Keyshawn?
1996. You got it.
Here's what I'll say. I do think Jeremiah Smith is probably the most talented player that'll be in this draft class. I'm actually excited about watching this wide receiver class, and that'll be the position that I'll do next, and I'll get started on that, hopefully by Friday, because I think this class has the potential to be, pretty deep and actually have some number ones in it. And I think he's going to go a little bit higher than number 3, depending on who's there, because I think right now, based off of the 10 quarterbacks I've done, I gave 4 of them what I would call starter level grades. I don't grade by round and say, oh, this guy's, I gave this guy a first round grade. It's, are you going to be a starter in the National Football League? And to me, at that point, you take a starter wherever you feel the value is right to take a starter. And so of the 10,
by the way, not to interrupt you, but I just want to say that would explain Ty Simpson going to the Rams at 13, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
So, and for me, I just, this kid is special. And then again, some of these teams have already, taken a position. Like Sharon, can you throw the graphic up again, please, of the top 8 picks? So if you're looking at this graphic, right? Arizona has a chance to, let's just say Carson Beck is the quarterback and they win 7 or 8 games, and this pick will be a little bit further down. You got to believe that even if they are at number 3, they would probably feel like, hey, we got our guy. And so you would want to surround him with better players. Obviously, we know what the Jets are going to do, and the Dolphins obviously would clearly do it if they're up this high. We'll see where the Saints are and where the Raiders are. And even the Titans, for that matter, and where they are in their transition. Some of these teams were, and then if Aaron Rodgers is playing at a serviceable level, and if he does indeed come back to the Steelers, I don't know that they'll be picking as high. And I know this team order is what it is, whatever simulation it was, but it could get really interesting just based off of who's there. And I think also if the Jets have a solid season where they're picking somewhat out of the top 10, they're going to have to earn their way back up because they have those 3 ones that are going to be able to use and leverage to get them up to wherever pick they are. And it'll be interesting, too, to see how high they're willing to go and what quarterback that they ultimately end with, because how ironic would it be if they don't finish with the number 1 pick, they work their way to number 2, and then, Dante Moore ends up falling to him again at number 2, right? Because that was the projected pick in this year's draft class. So I'm excited because one thing I'll end with this. The one thing that I've appreciated the most about certain teams in this draft was their actual strategy. Not necessarily every player that they picked, but the strategy of how they got there. Like I really came away with a lot of appreciation for some of those teams' process.
Yeah, that the Jets things will be interesting because Dante Moore could actually go back to school again if he does not want to go to the Fighting Rick Spielmans. But I think that team is going to be better. I think you talked about that before. In the last minute here, have you had a chance to watch Colin Simmons and Dylan Stewart? Because those guys are juiced up and they are going to have an opportunity to be top 10 picks given the way that they played. What are you smiling at?
I love good D-line play. And so I'm super excited about that. I'm going quarterbacks, I'm going receivers, I'm going edge, and then I'm going back to tackle. And that's going to be my workflow.
I don't think, and we don't have the official measurements yet because those numbers aren't out. This is not going to be a Reuben Bain situation in this draft. I think these guys are going to check all the boxes historically, and then we can just focus on the freaking tape and not have to worry.
I'll be interested to see how heavy the South Carolina edge guy is because he looks like light framed on tape.
Yeah, he's 6'6", 250 on the team site, so that means he might be playing lighter than that. I thought he looked long and not thick, but well put together. But right, we'll see. Yeah. He plays with power. Colin Simmons is a little more compact. He plays with power as well. All right, let's take a quick break here. Those are picks 1 through 8 through the way to early mock draft. We have a couple more quarterbacks to get through, and we're going to hit picks 9 through 16 and another big play wide receiver who has made his way to Texas by way of Auburn. And we'll talk about all those players right after this. Welcome back to With the First Pick. We're working our way through my way too early mock draft, 2027 edition, 350 days out from the actual 2027 draft in Washington, D.C. We did picks 1 through 8. Ran. Let's go 9 through 16. Let's see the graphic producer, Sharon, because I'm going to start with Leonard Moore, the cornerback out of Notre Dame. And if you want to get an idea of who this young man is, just go watch them play USC because he came as close to shutting down Mekhi Lemon as anybody. And when I say close, he actually did it. David Stone is a juiced-up interior edge rusher out of Oklahoma. I had him going 10 to the Atlanta Falcons. I had Leonard Moore going to the Panthers if you're interested in listening to this. Mateo Uiagalelei, and this is based on upside because we talked about him a lot last fall, Rand, and never quite met those expectations. Young player returned to Oregon, so we'll see what he's all about. I had him going to the Giants. Nico Iamaleava is another quarterback. Had him going to the Vikes. That's interesting. Cam Coleman, an enormous wide receiver who plays in terms of his open field ability, stiff-arming guys in space. He plays like he's a little sawed-off running back with the ball in his hands, and he's enormous as a catch radius guy. Had him going to the Commanders. And John Mateer. And look, this is a little rich. I understand. We were all high on John Mateer's potential last year coming from Washington State to Oklahoma. Got hurt this year halfway through the Oklahoma season. Wasn't quite the same afterwards, but I love the idea of him as Baker 2.0 in Tampa Bay. And then Amari Washington going to the Jets and John Henry Daly, huge sack guy. Utah transferred to Michigan, have him going to the Cincinnati Bengals. So, Rand, we can go anywhere you want to go here. We can keep the quarterback conversation going since you've seen so many of them. I had Nico Iamaleava and John Mateer there. And your thoughts on those guys. And look, throw out some other names of guys you've watched thus far because you're ahead of me in that conversation. I know Drew Mestamaker, UNT, transferred to Oklahoma State, is also going to be a guy that's going to be on radars very shortly.
Yeah, so hadn't had the chance to go back and finish watching Nico yet or John Mateer. Like I said, I named off all the guys that I've watched so far. I'm really, from a standpoint of the quarterback position, I say, Julian Saying is really interesting. I know he was a Heisman finalist, and I think it's depending on who you're watching in terms of what you're getting out of Julian Saying, and I'll be interested to see how this year shakes out for him because you think about how dominant that defense was, right? And the players that we just saw get drafted off of that defense. And then you have one receiver that's went 4th overall. You got another one that'll be a top 5 pick. And so it makes you think, like, what was missing from that team? And if Julian Saying is the quarterback that people are saying he is, then he should have lifted that team, right? And especially with the talent that around him. So I want to, reserve judgment there, but I'm really interested in seeing him finish. And then 2 guys for me, Trinidad Chambliss and C.J. Carr. I think
Mm.
C.J. Carr played in a way. He plays safe and efficient football, and you could tell in his first year as a starter at Notre Dame that they kind of managed him. So I'm really interested to see how much of the offense are they going to turn over and put in his hands. And then Trinidad Chambliss, man, the more you watch him, I mean, he's accurate, he's efficient, he's athletic. To me, his game is a cross between Kyler Murray and what Russell Wilson was when he first came in. You can see a lot of those similarities. I think he has Kyler-like athleticism to be able to run the ball, but I think he throws the football efficiently, takes good care of the football. So I'm excited to see him because he's a guy that he may not go as high as some of these other guys, but it wouldn't surprise me that by year 2, year 3, he's starting, for somebody. But Sharon, can we throw up the 9 through 16 graphic again so I could talk through some of these other guys? The Leonard Moore one. So Leonard Moore first caught my attention, like you said, in that USC game last year as I was evaluating Mekhi Lemon. And I made a note to myself in my notebook, and I just put Notre Dame number 15, circled it, right? Because Leonard Moore showed me where Mekhi Lemon is going to have struggles at the next level. Right. And that's where I really started to see that Mekhi Lemon may only be a slot. Not may only be a slot. He can play on the outside, but he'll make his money playing in the slot because Leonard Moore has length. He has the ability to turn and run with guys. And so his length, with his arm length really gave Mekhi Lemon some problems. So that's where he first jumped off to me. And we saw, a corner this year go in the top 6. I think Leonard Moore, based off of and I hadn't studied him yet, but just based off the little bit I've seen, he could potentially be in that argument as well. And another guy we had on the list that we thought potentially was going to come out this year and would have had some first-round buzz was Amari Washington, the defensive tackle out of Oregon. Young guy who's got a ton of upside and potential, but he's explosive. He has the ability to hit gaps. He can one gap penetrate. He has it in his body to be able to anchor and hold double teams. Some of the stuff for young guys anchoring on double teams is just a technique issue, but those linebackers behind him, Betcher and the likes were able to flow and make plays because he kept bodies off of them. So I like that pick. I don't know that just the style of play for a guy like John Mateer, I don't know that he goes top 15. You can see but maybe again, because he has some Bo Nix to his game, right? And that was my comp last year, was seeing some Bo Nix in his play. So I want to see where he goes this year. Is he going to take better care of the football? Because he turned the ball over at a high clip last year for Oklahoma. But every game that Oklahoma either won or had a chance to win, it was because of his ability to keep them in the ball game.
Yeah, and he struggled with that. I think it was a wrist injury. So that kept him out for about a month, but then he wasn't back to 100% for what felt like the second half of the season. He can rip it, and he can rip it into small windows. Sometimes the windows are too small, but he's exciting if nothing else. And this may be too high. This is more sort of a sentimental pick. What do you think about a couple things? Let me stay with the quarterbacks quickly here. Trinidad being older, and he's probably 6 feet. Care about any of those things?
I mean, it factors in, but I mean, we gotta accept, like, certain positions. You don't mind the quarterback being older, because what does a quarterback being older equate to? It equates to, or it should equate to, maturity. It should equate to experience, right? And allows you to. It's easier. You would think, conventional wisdom speaking, it's easier for a 25-year-old quarterback, let's just say, to make the transition to the next level than a 20 or 21-year-old quarterback, just from a grown man maturity standpoint, right? So sometimes you got to throw that age argument out of the window. And these quarterbacks are playing into their late 30s, early 40s. So it leads to, if Trinidad Chambliss is, and I don't know how old he is, let's just call him 24 at this point, right? Let's just call him 24. And let's just say he'll turn 25 at the top of the season or during his rookie season. If he has a great career and he plays 15 years in the National Football League, if he plays 10 years, he's 35. And if he plays 15, then he would be 40. And so you've gotten all you needed to out of his body of work. So certain positions I could care less about the age part of it. Now his size is what it is. He's 6 feet, 6'1". We'll see what it was, but I mean, you see here we got the graphic up. We're talking about John Mateer, but the logo we're talking about is the Buccaneers. How tall is Baker Mayfield?
Right.
You know, he's barely 6'1", maybe, 6'1". And we've seen Kyler Murray have success. I just think, again, his style of play is efficient. And before we got on, I was watching Josh Hoover, who's transferring to Indiana from TCU. What I'm seeing in a lot of these guys so far, I mean, you have your Dante Moore, your Arch Mannings, your Brandon Sorsby, the guys who, physical tools and traits just jump off the tape. But then you have your Julian Sings, your C.J. Carr, your Trinidad Chamberlains, those guys, and Josh Hoover, even for that matter, that just play an efficient game where they just take care of the football. They do a lot of things well, and just you leave from watching these guys like, man, I would trust having this guy in the lineup if he needed to play.
Yeah, Josh Hoover was a fun watch last year at TCU. I don't think he has the arm strength of some of these other quarterbacks, but he's going to be in a system where I'll just say this. We worked with Ben DiNucci, and Ben DiNucci did some of the With the First Pick pre-draft stuff last week. And Signetti was at James Madison, Ben's last year there, and he said, that's the reason I got drafted. He simplified things. He said you don't have to hit a home run every play, and sometimes the coach can help you get to where you want to get to. Also, Trinidad Chambliss quickly, he'll be 24 in August when the season starts, so he'll be 25 as a rookie in the NFL. Again, in the post-COVID world, that's not the end of your opportunity to be a really good football player at the next level. And I'll just mention quickly before we take a break here, Cam Coleman has a chance to absolutely ball out once he transferred from Auburn to Texas. The Auburn situation, the quarterback was the situation there wasn't great. At Texas, it'll be Arch Quavius, so I expect things to be much better there. All right, let's take a quick break here. We'll continue the conversations starting with pick 17. We'll see if you have any more quarterbacks left. And then we'll turn our attention to some edge rushers, some offensive linemen. We'll talk about that right after this. All right, Rand, let's keep the way too early 2027 mock draft conversations going. Pick 17 through 24 in this segment here. And producer Sharon, let's see what we got here. I got Caden Green, offensive lineman out of Missouri, going 17th to the Bears. He plays tackle. I thought he might have come out this year. He's going to have to probably kick inside the guard. Jordan Ross, the edge rusher out of LSU, to the Jags at 18. And let's start the conversation here before I get through the rest of this, Rand. I said this during the draft show with you and B-Mac and Pete. Didn't even really get much pushback. I would take Charlie Becker, wide receiver out of Indiana, over Ryan Williams, the wide receiver out of Alabama. And you okay with that?
I mean, let's just let it play out. let's let it play out. Because, and again, I think Charlie Becker, he's a local Nashville kid. I think he is talented, but let's let this thing play out. I know Ryan Williams had a down year, but we can't ignore the way he burst on the scene as a freshman. And because, listen, there was 2 years ago we were talking about the argument if Ryan Wilson. If Ryan Williams was better than J.J. Smith. That was an argument at one point. So we're not going to say all of a sudden everybody's better than Ryan Williams. So let's just pump our brakes and wait and see. The one kid that I'm really excited about on that list was Damon Wilson, the transfer from Missouri. He was another guy who I wrote his number down. I believe he was number 9. I want to say
8 or 9. Digit. It was hard to tell them apart. I think he was 8.
Yeah. So
him and Zion Young had similar numbers. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. And so, I saw him watching Zion Young, and I remember coming away like, it's number 8. And so I remember coming away like, well, wait a minute, who is this other fella? Because he's the one that's juiced up, that's twitchy, that's explosive, he was everything that I thought I was going to see when I watched Zion Young.
Right.
So that's where I was like, let me put him in the margins. And then when I realized that he transferred, I was like, oh. And then you mix in the amount of time that we spent with, whether it was Messidor or Ruben Bain, and then with Jason Taylor. and seeing what Jason Taylor's all about and what he teaches and seeing his drill work at the University of Miami Pro Day, like this kid is going, if he plays, if he brings how he played at Mizzou over to Miami and takes his game to another level with the way Jason Taylor has those guys prepare and become technically sound, he's going to go much higher than 22. Now again, there's no medical, there's no character, just straight tape, straight ability.
Right.
I think he has the chance to go much higher than 22. You were talking about Caden Green. He was on my list, and I'm going back now, pulling it up. My initial, let me see, let me find my original list. He was on my original list as a guard. I had him listed in my guard category, and I had him in my top 5 of guards from last year's draft class. So, you know, another one that I'm ready to see how he plays and if there's much of a difference. That's why I like to have multiple touch points of my evaluation. So, and if I'm watching, like all the guys that I'm watching now that I hadn't seen before, like if we're talking about Arch, I watched it this time last year, I watched his 2 starts from 2024. And then I just wrote my evaluation on that. And then I go back and you watch some 2025 and I make an update to see what has changed from his game, whether pluses or negatives. And so now I'll have another touch point in 2026 to be able to say, okay, these things are still showing his head, or he's, improved greatly, amongst those things. It was the same thing with Sonny Styles last year, where people forget Sonny Styles played with 2 shoulder braces on that first year at linebacker. And so he wasn't, really overly physical in his block destruction, or he didn't necessarily see the triangle clearly, let's say. But then you saw a significant jump from 2024 to 2025. So to me, that just adds context. Instead of just watching 1 year of tape of him of just 2025, you don't know how much he's grown, which if you've seen how much he's grown from 2024 to 2025, it gives you a better opportunity to project how he's going to be in 2026 moving forward.
Another great example is Blake Miller, the offensive lineman, right tackle, 2024 tape at Clemson. It was all over the place. 2025 was much more consistent, and that ultimately led to him being a first-round pick.
It's
Damon
funny
Wilson, by the way.
You mentioned,
yeah, go ahead.
It's funny you mentioned Blake Miller, right? Because that's exactly how I felt. And I'm actually pulling up my report on him now from that year. My number 1 line is he's an interesting prospect. So I see traits that would make him the level of a starting right tackle, but there are too many variances in his tape on a down-to-down basis at this point. And then that was from 2024. And in my 2025 update, I see a big improvement in his fundamentals and techniques, particularly in pass protection. So again, having that understanding of what he was before to where he became this year kind of allows you to project him a little bit better.
That's right. And that's an important part of the process that maybe we don't talk enough about, but it is incredibly helpful when you're trying to figure out who these kids are going to become, or these young men are going to become based on where they have come from. I mentioned this about Damon Wilson. He was at the U Pro Day walking around. He's unofficially 6'4", 250. He looked bigger than that in person, so we'll see where he is. And we know that Jason Taylor does not mess around with those guys, and those guys are high energy, get after guys anyway. So that's who they bring in there, and I imagine Damon Wilson's going to be the next in a long line of such players. Another edge rusher I want to mention, we talked about him a little bit last fall. I don't know if you remember, or I had your notes on, but Quincy Rhodes, the edge rusher out of Arkansas, he's unofficially 6'6", 280. And I was talking to Taylor Green about him just to get a sense of who he was. And he said, no one beats Quincy in the building in the morning, and he's the last one there. And he is also a hard worker. And he was fun, man. I think he does have some room to grow. And I'm fine, waiting on that development in 2026. And a couple other names I mentioned before I give the floor back to you for a second here. Carter Smith, the left tackle at Indiana. I had him in some first-round mock drafts back in the fall. He returned to school. And then Cade Piper out of Iowa, interior offensive lineman, who may end up being the best offensive lineman out of that group. That included 3 guys who just got drafted a few days ago.
Yeah, so I pulled up my report from Quincy Rhodes last year, and I watched him against Indiana, Texas A&M, and LSU. I wasn't as high on him when you're ranking him with the class that just came out this year. I thought, I loved his size, his length, his quickness, and the twitch in his body. And I felt he had the versatility to kick inside and be able to rush in some of the sub stuff. My thing for him was the feel. Did he have the feel to be able to anticipate the snap count, get off the snap count, quickly, because he could see it and feel it. And I thought it just instinctually, it was just like something there that held me back a little bit. I did think he had natural power in his body and in his hands to create knockback. But there was just little small things, technical things, like you negate your power as a player when you allow your base, which is your feet, to be this close together, or you're on your toes. There's no power in those positions, right? And so that reared his head. So I'm actually glad he came back to school, because just based off of my 2025 evaluation, I didn't see, a day one or early day two pick in him. But I think now him being able to come back to school, be able to work on those things, he has a chance to improve that.
Yeah, and that's the whole point of what you're talking about. If seeing that improvement from one year to the next, that's why we try to watch as many of these players as we can, so we have a frame of reference. Or if someone pops into our radar in October, we'll go back and see what was going on the year before to help them get to where they are now. All right, Bruce Ron, let's take another break here, and we'll come back and we'll hit picks 25 through 32 and wrap up the way too early 2027 mock draft. And then we'll look back at the 2026 version, and Rand can laugh at some of the things I had going on there. But let's take a quick break first. When we come back, we'll hit the final few picks of this way too early 2027 version right after this. All right, Rand, let's look at picks 25 through 32 here on this way too early mock draft 2027 version. And any names stick out to you, we'll hit them up. Starts with Clev Lubin out of Louisville, the edge rusher there. And I'll say this about Clev. We talked about Blake Miller last segment. I asked him at the combine some of the guys that he thought gave him the most trouble, and Clev was the name that came up. I was not necessarily surprised, but I thought if he had come out, he might have had a chance to be a top 100 pick. So I put him on my radar as a guy to watch. Also had Terrence Carter Jr., the tight end out of Texas Tech. And this is, again, sort of a sentimental pick because he's a high-end athlete, makes plays at all three levels, needs to get better as a route runner. So that's something to keep an eye on there. Brandon Baker's the other tackle at Texas. Trevor Gooseby went top 10 in this way too early mock draft. And Baker plays on the right side. He looks the part. He's got to play more consistently, and that's just the reality of it. Ellis Robinson, the fourth cornerback, and then out of Georgia, and then Xavier Brown, cornerback out of Alabama. Xavier's legit 6 feet, probably close to 190. Ellis is a little slighter of frame, it looks like, according to the unofficial, but he plays big. They're both outside guys, and they're both contested points catch players. And then the last two I'll mention here, Kenyatta Jackson, the edge rusher at Ohio State. This is another guy that has a chance to make huge strides. He was a part-time player coming into the season, and he does have some DPR ability. And then, my guy's son, Taron Perkins, who was this year's version of Romello height, except he weighs 20 pounds less than Romello out of Ole Miss, juiced up at 211. You got to figure out where to play him. But I wanted to give him some love here since he very well may not end up going in the first round. Anything get your attention in that? Final name.
When I saw your guy Perkins on there, I know that's his last name might as well be Wilson, because you've been talking him up for 2 years now. Kenyatta Jackson is an interesting one because he came into Ohio State with a lot of hype. I think he was a highly recruited guy. He's wearing the 97, like the Bosa's did, and so he came into it with a lot of hype, and you can see there just in this graphic in the picture, the size and the length. But I'm really interested to see where this process goes and where this project goes with him. He's working with one of the best defensive line coaches in the history of college football, and Larry Johnson, and the amount of guys that he put in the league from Penn State to Ohio State. I'll just say this. I don't know that he's going to go top 32 right now, based off of just the little bit of flashes I've seen in cross tape. So that's why I say I'm interested to see where this spring ball has taken him and where it's going to take him in the spring, because there is a situation where we weren't talking about Arvell Reese this time last year, and he went top 5. So that's one of them. I'm actually pulling up a name now that I'm just going to put it on, and we can talk about him a little bit later. But just remember the name Chris Cole out of Georgia, number 9. He's a linebacker. So it's what's today's date? It's 12:44 Central Time, and on the 29th of April with the first pick. First ones to put it out there, Chris Cole from Georgia. He has a chance to be next year's Arvell Reese.
Oh Lord, okay. You're not hedging your bets. You're going all in on that. All right, I like to hear it. And yeah, like I said, I should remind you, this is more of a watch list than a mock draft, because again, we have not watched. Forget watching 400 guys. We haven't watched 50 guys. We're just cleaning our shoes off from the 2026 NFL draft. So we're throwing out some names of guys to watch. We know about the quarterbacks, of course, and to your point, Rand, I think Kenyatta Jackson has a chance to take that next step. But, we said the same thing about Zach Harrison a few years ago, who ended up going to the 4th round, I believe, sort of a huge edge rusher out of Ohio State. Good player, didn't make it to the 1st round, but there was that 1st-round buzz the summer before. So just something to keep in mind here. So those are all 32 picks of the Way Too Early mock draft. It'll come out on the website, cbssports.com, next week. Maybe I'll make a few tweaks here or there. Drew Mestamaker, for example, or maybe CJ Carr, who keeps raving about. But for now, that's what we got. But we're going to take one more quick break here. And when we come back, I'm going to allow Rand to take one last shot at me over the 2026 draft, and specifically my Way Too Early mock draft from last summer, which it could have been worse, I'll say that. But we'll talk about that and all its fun and nonsense right after this. All right, Rand, let's end this like we end most shows, poking fun at me. Let's take a look back at our Way Too Early, and by our, I mean my Way Too Early mock draft from 2026, came out last June. Producer Sharon, let's see the top 10. Let's see how that went. Oh, sweet mercy. Garrett Nussmeier going to his dad in New Orleans. He went in the draft, but he went 7 rounds later, and about 250-something picks later, the number 1 overall, Garrett Nussmeier did end up going to the Chiefs. But look, there's some wins there. Caden Proctor, TJ Parker ended up going in round 2, had a chance to go in round 1. Spencer Fano, Peter Woods, Caleb Downs, CeCe Malinois. Then I had Drew Aller going top 10. I was banking on him taking the next step. That did not happen. And then Reuben Bain Jr. I think that's a pretty good top 10. Antonio Williams wrapped it up there, and we both liked him. He got hurt early in the year, ended up being a 3rd-round pick for the Commanders. Grade that 11 months out from the draft. How'd I do?
How are we grading it, first and foremost? We're just seeing how many guys actually went 1st round.
Yeah, but how impressed or unimpressed are you that I had that many or that few last June based on what was going to happen in late April?
Well, let me start by showing this, because this you are not.
Oh, he wouldn't have made another. If you're watching, it says, or listening, it says MDG, which is mock draft guru, which is Pistol Pete Prisco, who did win the mock draft games, if you will. He had the most picks right leading up to the actual mock draft last week. So I'm glad that Rand leaned into that. So Pete does one mock draft and he got it right.
No, it's actually not as bad as you painted it out to be. And I know your little game. I did terrible. And that's for everybody to say, you know what, Ryan, that's not bad. Oh, really? It's not. I know.
That's all I was looking for.
That you're doing. But no, I mean, you had Spencer Fano in the top 10. He went top 10. You had Caleb Downs, who went just outside of the top 10. CeCe Malinois, you had in the top 10, went top 10. I'm trying to think who else, because
Reuben Bain Jr. was in there.
Yeah, Reuben Bain went 15?
And in real life, and 9 in the Way Too Early mock draft for sure.
So I mean,
let me throw out some other names at you.
Mm-hmm.
At pick 15 or pick 14, Fernando Mendoza. Had him going to the Steelers. Boy, I was trying to wish that into existence. That didn't work out too good. Pick 15, Jeremiah Love.
You're always trying to get the Steelers layups. That's what you do.
And they took Drew Aller. Jeremiah Love went pick 15, just because of running back value, all that conversation. Ended up going 3rd overall, of course. Had him going to Dallas. And then had C.J. Allen going in the first round. He ended up going in round 2. Avion Terrell, we've been talking about him certainly since last summer. He slipped because of a slow 40 time. He went in round 2 as well. Kenyon Sadiq made the list. Jermod McCoy, R. Mason Thomas. So we had some guys there. I will say I got Kate Klubnik there. That didn't work out again based on we were trying to figure out projecting him to get better. Keldrick Falk made the list. And then Lenore Sellers, who we haven't even talked about yet, was at 32. I'll ask you this. As you work your way through the quarterbacks once again after the 2025 season, is Lenore's a first-round pick? Because as of right now, he is not for me.
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
And I'll reserve my evaluation on him for now. But no, I agree with you. I don't see a first-round player.
Some other names, and I'll be honest here. Isaiah World, I had him. He transferred from Nevada to Oregon, played left tackle, towards ACL very late in the year. He ended up going, I believe he went undrafted. So that projection didn't work out there. Tyreek Sapp out of Florida, we talked about him a little bit. I also believe he went undrafted. Xavier Chaplin, the offensive lineman out of Auburn, he transferred. He's since returned to school. And our guy, Chandler Rivers, I had him as my cornerback 1. He is a really good player. I didn't realize he was 5'9" when I put this together. I thought he was closer to 5'11". That said, I think he ended up being a 5th-round pick of the Ravens, and we talked about him the last few days on the draft recap shows about how he is basically some version of D'Angelo Ponce in terms of toughness and playing bigger than his size there. So I think the biggest exercise is that, or the biggest takeaway from this exercise is that, number one, we don't know. And number two, I'll ask you this before we get out of here. When you're with a team, is there any such exercise, conversation? What are you doing in the summertime in terms of trying to get this list together?
Well, I mean, most teams are subscribed to either Blesto or National Scouting Service. And so those guys are out on the road. You'll have those meetings coming up here sometime in May where they do where they really will unveil the first reading of next year's draft class and draft prospects. And so then that list will come out and then the teams will work off of those lists. Until that list came out, I would go back through my notes, like I said, guys that I wrote down from before or guys that didn't come out that I had already written reports on, and I would start there. And then you just scour the internet looking for some rankings and some lists and see, what's out there right now. And then that creates your initial list and you get to work. Typically, I would give myself a 2-week break where I'm not doing anything in terms of watching tape. But I mean, now I don't have hobbies. I don't have anything to do. So, and my kids are at school, wife's running errands, doing everything. So I just come sit in here and watch tape. Nothing else for me to do.
Well, I just put together a list of some more names for you. I have our list of 247 top 100 transfer guys from our guy Coop Patagna. I'm gonna forward that to you. And I got some other names, guys returning to school. So you can add it to the list until we get the Blesto list out there and work off of that next month. But let's take a deep breath here. 2026 is officially in the books. That closes the book on 2026 for us. But clearly, shout out to Pete Prisco one last time, mock draft guru. We're turning the page to 2027, so I'm excited about that as Rand does his little shimmy there. Check out With the First Pick wherever you get your podcast. Scan that QR code to get more. Thank you, guys, and we will see you in the next one.